Let's build our own operating system. Not from scratch, but at the same time, I wanted to kind of get this idea and put it in your head that you can make your operating system work exactly how you need it. Now, I'm not talking about Windows or Mac on this one because we want it to look exactly however we want it to look. Your operating system is going to look different than mine to suit your needs. So we'll talk about file browsers, like, hey, how do we want to interface? Obviously, people using Windows Explorer, well, there's a whole bunch of different file explorers we can use. We can use different looks, different build outs for the actual desktop environment. I'm going to rattle off some words real fast so you can actually see kind of the base install, what it kind of looks like. Here's KDE, here's GNOME, here's XFCE, and there's Mate. There's also a lot more than just these four, but I just kind of want to start you off with something just a little bit to experiment with. And I made separate customization videos for each one of these. So we're going to customize this a bit today, but just know that you can go far more than everything I've just showed and make it your own. And that's really what this is about, building your own operating system to suit your needs. Enough talk. Let's get on the actual desktop and start building it out. I'm going to be using something called Arch Linux today. Know that you could use this in Debian or Ubuntu, which are just different flavors of Linux. I'm only using Arch because it's the easiest to build out your own, because it comes with almost nothing on it and it's just a clean slate to build with. And as I make options in here, I'm going to show you alternatives to where you can go, okay, instead of this file browser, we're going to go this way, or instead of this desktop environment, we could go this way, and just kind of show you how you could customize this to suit you as a person. Because I know this isn't for everybody, but it's much like an alternative way of living. Because I think so many people are just dissatisfied with their operating system they have on now, and they really just want something new, fresh, something that they make with their own hands. And that's what this is about. Let's stop talking and get into it. All right, on startup here, I'm doing this on a regular computer. I'm pressing F8 to get my boot menu, but many other BIOSes have different ones. Some are like F11 or F12. And I have a little bootable USB drive that I made. If you're not sure how to make one of those, I made an entire video. Windows to Linux is what it's called, and I'll drop that playlist below. So if you need a little more explanation, don't worry, I got you. So we'll go UEFI on this guy and boot right onto our Ventoy boot drive. So I use this to boot into pretty much any operating system I want, to install Windows, to install Linux. Heck, I think I even have some Hackintosh stuff in here as well. But we're going to go ahead and do Arch Linux. To start out with, we're just going to update the actual installer just so we can install a couple packages before we start out. So we're going to just go pacman-s, and then from here, we're just going to type wget, and we're also going to go pacman-contrib. And if you get that error, just do a pacman, and then just do an sy to download. Do it one more time and hit yes. With that done, now we're going to do wget archfi.sf.net/archfi. And from here, we're just going to do sh archfi. And now we have kind of like a menu, because I didn't want to stay on command prompt. I think a lot of people, it is just be an easier start. Just know that you can do all this from command line. It's just as much harder. So we're going to start with language, English, keyboard layout. We're going to just do US, disk partitions. You could do auto partitions here, but since I have a ton of disks in this system, since this is an EFI, we need to use CG disk. So we're going to hit edit with CG disk, and then we're going to select the disk we're going to install it on. It's going to be SDA. All right, from here, we're going to just delete these partitions, and then we're going to create a new one. First sector, just hit enter for this. Size in sectors, this is where we're going to actually say the size of the partition, which is going to be 300 megabytes. Type of partition. Now we want this first partition to be EFI, so it'll be where our boot files reside. We'll go list, and we'll just type EF. And there's EFI system partition, which would be EF00. So EF00 for this partition. And we're going to name this EFI. You'll see the partition name right in there. Now we want to make the rest of the drive just a regular Linux. So we're just going to go enter, enter, and then enter. And we're going to just call this one nothing. But well, let's just call it Linux for now, or ROS. And then we're just going to write this out. And we'll just say yes. And that's it. We'll quit. So with the partitions done, we can now select the partitions and install. The boot device, it's going to be SDA1, since we formatted the SDA disk. The first partitions, the boot. The swap, we didn't make one. The root is going to be SDA2. The home, we didn't make that either, so we'll select none. And we'll say yes. And then we'll format both these partitions. For the EFI, obviously, it tells us EFI. For the next one, we're going to select ext4 if that's what you want. That's more of a tried and true, but you could also select BetterFS if you like. For this, you know what, we're going to live on the wild side and go with a new file system and do BetterFS. I really like it. And then mount and install. So now we're going to install the Linux kernel with install packstrap. Now you can select your different types of kernels here depending on what you want to do. If you want more bleeding edge, just regular Linux is fine. If you want a little more reliable, I would choose LTS. For today, we're going to just do plain Linux, and we're going to install Linux firmware, and then any other things that you want to add. Obviously, I'm only going to install the first two right there. So we're going to config Arch Linux now. In this computer name, we're going to just call this Titus OS. We have already set the keyboard layout at the start. That's optional. Setting locale. We're going to select ENUS right here. We can set the time. And this is actually, I'm Central Time in the United States. So US Central. And this is, you can select the hardware clock. Just know Windows uses local. So if you're dual booting this with Windows, you might want to just hit local. However, if you run my Windows script, I always set the Windows clock to UTC because this is actually the proper way. Microsoft just sets up their operating system improperly using local time. So that's why I always set things to UTC, and I even configure Windows to do UTC. Set the root password, generate fstab. What this does is it just makes sure all of our devices are bootable. You always want just that first option, UUID. Bootloader, I always select grub for this. However, if you're dual or triple booting, sometimes if you want to do like a Hackintosh, Windows, and this operating system, you could do refind. I really like refind. However, grub's probably the easiest if you're just replacing the existing operating system. And we'll just hit install grub, and then that's pretty much done. We'll go ahead and install the bootloader now. Obviously, select the drive that you want, which is that first one, and this one's just going to be EFI. And we'll go into the Arch DI. We'll say yes to this question, and then we're going to just install and run it, and just select the first option. Updates. So the very first thing, install Pacman Contrib. Next up, choose your other installer. There's only one more thing we're installing from this menu. I like to use Yay, less typing. That's the whole reason why. So we're just going to install Yay. You may not know what Yay is, but just know it goes out and installs pretty much any package we want from the net. That's why I really enjoy it as an install helper. So we'll hit yes to this. And you don't have to type out yes for each one of these questions. You can just hit enter. The capitalized one is always the default. So if it's in, it's going to answer no to the in. If it's capital Y, it'll answer yes. All right. And then we just hit back from here. And now we can go to the install portion of this. And I'm going to walk through each one of these categories. You choose what suits you best. So console, you can see there's a whole bunch of different things. Generic, this is all the different packages. So if there's packages in here that you don't necessarily want, or just leave them at the default, I think they come with a really good set. I will go ahead and add NeoFetch. If this is a laptop, I'd add Power Top because that would register all the power usage of my computer, but this is just a desktop, so I'm going to leave the rest of these unchecked. Come down to compression tools. I like to install all compression tools. If there's something I want to unzip or use, I just want to make sure I can use that. So it doesn't matter if it's from Mac, if it's from Windows, whatever, I know I can open up that compressed file. Networking tools, this is entirely up to your discretion. I really like rsync at the very least. Traceroute and bind tools is more for tracing network problems. Maybe if you're doing some hacking tools or something like that, you might add some extra things, or like an in-map and those types of nice utilities for networking. So it just depends on your skill set, what you want here. I would go ahead and just make sure you have rsync in here at a very least. And I'm going to go ahead and just leave those top 3 checked. Web browser, I'm not going to select anything here. Recovery tools, I'm not going to select anything there either. Going into system, kernel, we've actually already installed Linux on this, so we don't actually need to do anything there. Services, this is where we would do our network, SSH, cronnies, scheduled tasks. The rest of this is pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, for the U code, you want to select your actual processor. This is an AMD processor, so AMD is what I have. The rest of this, blues, you might do if you're doing any Bluetooth on your computer. I'm not doing any Bluetooth, so I'm going to leave that off and hit OK. And these are just saying, hey, do you want these services to start on boot? I would typically say yes to each one. If you use Network Manager, you'll get a prompt. Do you want to disable DHCPD? Yes, you do. So those are the only things that you really need to change in here. But most of the time, you can just enter through these screens. File system, OS prober, that's required for multi-boot. So if you're doing multi-boot systems, like I have Windows installed here, you'd want to tick that. If not, leave it off. It'll make your rebuilds a little faster if you ever change anything with the boot. Now, I do like to add SSHFS and CIFS utils. If you ever connect to Windows shares, make sure you install these 2 things. Very important. And also SMB client. In fact, I like a lot of these different things because I utilize quite a bit of network on all my systems. So I'm going to go ahead and install those. Coming down into sound, again, you want pretty much the defaults here. One thing, make sure you do Pulse Audio Bluetooth if you're going to use Bluetooth headset. Print, you'd go ahead and install this if you're using a printer. If it's an HP printer, you'd want HP lib as well. However, I'm not going to be doing any printing, so I'm going to skip this section. Now we get into more of the actual display. We've got kind of our core utilities with our system, so we can do pretty much everything we need to do, unzip files, those types of things. But now we need to start getting into the graphic elements. This starts with Xorg. You can do an info, kind of show what you're seeing. In here, I have a 2060 from NVIDIA. So I'm going to hit install. And most times you can just leave this as default, which I'm going to go ahead and do. It's really only installing those 2 packages that I selected at the front. On fonts, I really like to go ahead, make sure I leave all these in. Getting some fonts on your system, I think, are kind of neat. If you want Microsoft fonts, go ahead and grab this front top one. I also like to get like the Roboto and Roboto Mono. Those are really nice ones as well. If you're looking for like a lot of emoji type styles, the font's awesome, has a lot of really neat things. I would recommend grabbing that because you can read a lot more stuff. And then probably grab the Ubuntu font family to finish out my fonts. We'll let this install. And our fonts are done. We'll go back. And now we need input drivers. Again, you just leave that one lib input in. And then video drivers, we're going to want proprietary since I'm using an NVIDIA card. If you're AMD, you're going to want just the open source drivers right here and just select AMD. Now we're going to want NVIDIA since this is an NVIDIA card. If you are using a custom kernel, you want NVIDIA DKMS though. All right, with the Xorg done, now we get to the desktop environment. At the very start, I showed you Plasma, which this is Plasma, XFCE4, GNOME, Cinnamon, which is famously Linux Mint, if you're familiar with that. LXDE, which is not really used much. LXQT is more of what's called Lubuntu, so you could do that one. Mate looks like that. Enlightenment, OpenBox, and Deepin. I would say it just depends on what you want. OpenBox kind of gives you that minimal. Deepin gives you that sleek aesthetic, almost like a Mac. For Mac users, you might base your current install off of that. For me, again, since I've been on Windows forever, Plasma is by far the easiest and most comfortable. And I've made a configuration video. I'll link that up top as well for Plasma, but we'll configure it a little bit when we get in here. SDDM, this is what actually is like the login screen for KDE. So we're going to hit yes to that question. For actual applications, this is something that a lot of people struggle with. Me personally, I hate a lot of the applications for KDE. I'm actually going to say no. No. You can actually go selective here and only select the things you like. I really like the selective install. I'm going to leave Dolphin in, even though I don't really like Dolphin as a file browser, just so you can see that. Kate is basically a text editor. And you know what? I can probably take off Print Manager, as we're not going to need that. And the rest of this we're going to just leave as is. Spectacle's basically a screenshot tool as well that I really like. But if you don't like Spectacle, I actually use Flame Shot quite a bit as well. I'll give alternatives for all this. That's where the beauty of all this happens, is we can choose every single package to make the install that we love. I'm going to just go back now, go back and back. Display Manager, this was actually already installed. Applications, and this is where you could do like Office. You could say, hey, I want an Office suite. You LibreOffice. I don't really like LibreOffice, but if you do, go for it. I really like FreeOffice, which you could do Yay-S FreeOffice, or you could do OpenOffice. There's just so many options here that, pick your poison. For internet web browser, you can choose any of these that you see here. I like Brave, which actually isn't on here, but I do want to install it with a web browser. Even though it's maybe not one that's selected off of this thing, I like Midori because it's basically an absolute minimal web browser. It like takes me back to the 90s, but there's no add-ins, there's no extensions. It's just plain Jane, hey, I just need to get on the internet and I can't be bothered with it taking up all my memory. Midori is a fantastic option. You can't really main it, I think. We're so spoiled by those extensions. But Midori itself, I absolutely love for a web browser, just to get in, do your business, and get out. And email, I really don't like any of the email clients on Linux, so I usually stick away from this. Usually I'm defaulting to webmail, whether that's Gmail, whether that's getting online and doing like an Office Outlook or Office 365. Outlook Online is actually pretty decent these days. Multimedia, you can install these. I recommend just doing GStreamer. This allows you to play pretty much all the movies and things that you need. For the actual video player, though, you wanted to use Celluloid. It's really, really good. I love it as an actual player, or SM player, I think, if that suits your fancy. VLC is what everyone usually defaults to, but I find that it runs like crap on Linux and just not a big fan. That's where I made a video specifically going over VLC and why I don't like it, for Linux at least. On Windows, I'll still use VLC just fine. Video tools, if you want to do like screen sharing and that type of thing, I really like OBS Studio for this, so I won't install any of these. Burner tools, who actually has a CD-ROM these days? Holy smokes. Graphic, GIMP is usually what I edit images with. I would install that. Dev applications, VS Code is usually what I use quite often to edit mini text files, or also, just publish a article on my website. Usually I'm always opening up VS Code for that, so I would go ahead and install code. The system itself, Gparted is great for partition management. Most people won't want that. The rest of this, I usually just leave off. You can do Wine and Wine Tricks. If you're going to be doing gaming, I'd probably recommend installing those two. And the rest, I'm just going to leave off. It did ask me about multi-repo. It just kind of went real quick there. You do want multi-repo for gaming. You're going to need 32-bit support for a lot of Steam games. Actually, Steam won't even install without 32-bit. So I highly recommend just doing Wine and Wine Tricks if you're doing any gaming. And then there's Pacman GUI, which you could install. Again, this is like an installer tool to where we could look up packages and install it in the graphic user interface. Again, I kind of already know all the packages, so I don't really care about this. For you, most people will like the actual seeing, hey, what are these packages? What packages can I download? This would be a great GUI tool for you to use. Again, I don't like it, so I'm not going to install it, as this is an operating system for me. Just know you're customizing options. Don't just copy what I'm doing. Kind of take what you feel, what you want out of your operating system and do that. As far as config, a couple little changes I make. My global editor, I have Vim. Most people will want Nano as it's way more user-friendly for out-of-the-box usage. Aliases, I also like to change this as well. I change usually LS to just LS3 right here. This just kind of colors my output, and this is a long listing where I like LS to be more horizontal. And then we just update it and then go back, and we're done with that. Firewall, set up your firewall here if you want to use one. Accounts, we do need to create a user. We're going to add Titus user. We'll go ahead, select our password. Because remember, we only added the root as a user, so we do need to add our user. Sudoers, we're going to add a sudoer. This just means we can install programs as Titus. We don't have to boot into root or some shenanigans there. So we're just going to add me and Titus user as that. Their account's set up. Systemd, don't really even need to do anything here. Xorg, nothing there. Boot, nothing here. So now we can go back, exit, and back, and unmount, and back again, and now we can reboot. And that's it. We have our custom base level system set up. Now, some people might be going, hey, this isn't really our own operating system. This is just Arch Linux. I'm like, kind of. But at the same time, we're making all those choices to build it out exactly how we want. So it's not necessarily just a copy or just another Linux distribution, so to speak. We get to make every choice of this. We don't even need to install our screen right here if we don't want, but we can. So I'm going to go ahead and get into the actual configuration of this right now. Let's actually modify our system to what we need it to look like. I'm going to make it look like a really fancy version of Windows, but just know you could change this around and change any behavior that you see. Sky's the limit. Poof. I've changed the login screen. There's a lot of different things you can do here. I'm not going to go too far in the customization of this specific desktop environment. I just kind of want to show you what's possible with it. There's so many magical things that can happen. As you see, I've kind of changed some of the default theming a little bit. For the file browser, I've changed it out. I kind of got this Nautilus one, or you can go PC Man FM, or you can go with Nemo, or there's also Dolphin, which actually I uninstalled, but let's just go ahead, pull up my terminal, and you can kind of see some of the customization I've already started to tinker with here. But let's say there's Dolphin, and I want to close it out and launch Dolphin. You notice how I have all these different file managers. Try them all out. Figure out which one suits you the best. Which one are you really enjoying? And then go, you know what? I think this is the winner right here. Then uninstall the rest of these packages. But that's what I mean, building your own operating system, choosing what you like the best. As you saw, I was using Terminator for my terminal. Well, that was custom, and I obviously made a lot of custom changes with Terminator right here. You can see I have quite a bit. But let's say I wanted to change this around. We have, you know, all my hotkeys where I like Terminator like this. But let's say you don't like Terminator. You want more of a traditional console. K-console, boom. You have your traditional console here where you can do all the different things. They do the same thing. It's just separate programs of accomplishing the same task. The idea is to get familiar with all the different things out there. When it comes to the settings in KDE, I did make that whole KDE customization video. Highly recommend you check that out. I will link it. But coming to global themes in KDE, you can change this to whatever you want. Let's change it to this theme and have a little bit different gradient and some opacity with some flashy colors. You can do that. You can get whole brand new themes here and install just about anything. You can make it look like Mac. You can make it look like pretty much whatever you can think it up. Like, let's say you wanted to make it look like Windows XP. Let's say you're living in the past and you want an XP. Let's see if there's Windows XP in here. Oh, there's Windows 7. Here you go. Windows XP, you can make it look exactly like Windows XP if you like. down to the file browser, to the login screen, all those weird little things. It's crazy what all you can do. However you want your operating system to look, you can make it look like that. Not just KDE, you can make it and function a whole different way. A lot of people don't like the traditional start menu bar like this. You know, let's say you want to change it to do more of an application launcher, more Mac-esque, or you want to do more of a search feature, you do that. That's pretty awesome. It just depends on what you want out of your operating system. And KDE might not give it to you, but there's another alternative. There's 10 or 20 different alternatives. Go to a subreddit and try it out. Check out Midori. You know, this is a neat little browser. Pulling this up, let's say we go to Reddit and go to a subreddit called Unix Porn. Don't worry. I know you're thinking that's a risky selection, but let's go ahead and go pull it up. You can see all the different kinds of desktops people come up with. It really explores the creativity. It makes it your own desktop. You can flip through all these different ones and go, you know what? What's this guy doing here to make his desktop look like that? You go full hacker, man. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff. This is where people come up with these ideas, and it's just a fun way to spot. But learning the different programs is important. Like right now, Midori, you're probably like, what the heck kind of web browser are you using? There's no extensions. It's bare bones. But you know what? If I pull up the little system monitor here, you'll notice Midori's taken up 34 megabytes of memory. Chromium would be eating up 1 million. You think I'm joking, but I'm not. It would be eating up at least a gig of space. A lot of times Chromium can go up to like 10 gigs, which by comparison in gigabytes, this is 0.03 gigabytes. That's a ridiculous amount. So while some people make fun of Midori for being lacking of features, it brings me back to how the web started and how sometimes our bloated web browsers come into being. But I like it just to have, in case there's something I need to pick up real fast, like that little Unix looking at all these different desktops. Just make it your own. That's the beauty of all this. Now I could go on further from here, but I really just wanted to instill in all the different ways you could change the different programs. But not just that. There's certain things you're going to leave behind. Go, hey, I'm going to miss my gaming. My gaming worked great on Windows, or when it wasn't bogged down with all the crap. It worked 100% of the time. I know every game was compatible. And you could dual boot to have that, or you could have a separate box like I do, where I just have a Windows box on command, and then I just launch Moonlight, which I made a video I'll link up here to where you could see game streaming in action, where that one box, it doesn't really do anything. It has Windows loaded, but all my games are loaded up on it. I can just stream it to wherever I am and never have to worry about it. The Microsoft Office, you could use the web-based versions, which works, or you could choose an alternative like FreeOffice, OpenOffice, LibreOffice. Gosh, there's just a billion different Office packages you could choose. Instead of Adobe, you could choose GIMP. Instead of Photoshop, you go with GIMP. But I don't say these things to try and get you to install some Linux distribution. I get these things to try and ignite that passion for technology. I don't know how many older folks are in the crowd, but back in the 90s and 2000s, there was this era of discovery and things that just is amazing. You know, when you get into a computer and you finally find something new that no one else does or knows, there's something really magical about that, where you just don't get that with Mac and Windows. It's a very predictable experience. One that I've really grown tired of, and honestly, it kind of puts me in a bad mood sometimes when I'm in it too much, where I am always discovering something new and just kind of customizing. It's definitely a nerd thing, and it doesn't appeal to everybody. It's an alternative lifestyle when it comes to computing, but it's one that I really wish more people would try. And that's really what this video is about, just to try and open up that door just a hair, just to say, hey, anything's possible. If you can think it, 10 teams have probably already done it, and you just are sitting there going, well, I have a buffet of choices. I guess I'm going to just pick that one and go left to right. And that's what you got to do. And you just pick out exactly what you enjoy, exactly what you like. But get on that Reddit. and flip through all those different desktops. Pick the one that's right for you, and then just start to mirror it, and then figure out what you like and what you don't like, and then change what you don't like to something else. And with that, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section, and I'll see you in the next one.